Okay, so I think it's a good time to start. By Israeli standards, we're also actually early. So I'm going to try and be formal. My name is Leyton. Hi to everybody. It wasn't clear, and I realized I didn't explain the meeting today, the webinar today, our discussion today will be in English. Together here with me is Wrotem Yanai and Jen, who is the author of the book. And if you don't mind, I'm going to let you introduce yourself. That's probably the best place to start.
Yeah, that's sure. Well, first of all, thank you so much, Adam, for including me and for Narit for the introduction. And I know we are going to talk about outdoor walk and talk therapy, but I just want to first express how I'm feeling about being with a group of Israeli therapists today. And I'm really touched to be here and very humbled by the work that you all are doing. And my hat goes off to you. I don't know if that's an American expression, but I'm really just so amazed by your strength and, of course, resiliency, which is like the epitome of Israelis today, if not always. And I think this strength and this quality is really important. And as caregivers, you're always showing up for other people. Don't forget about yourselves. Please take care of yourselves. And whatever I could do to support you, I want to be able to do. Even though I'm all the way over here in Washington, D.C., I do feel such a closeness to my Israeli friends and family and the therapists, of course. So please just take care of yourselves and let's be here for one another during this. So let's see. My name is Jen, and I've been a therapist for about 25 years. And I first was sitting in an office for about 13 years. And then I started running for training for a marathon. And I realized with these runs that people really opened up while moving. And so I started to think about my own work and how it could be different, how it could look different. And I could tell you more about that later, but essentially this evolved into the walk and talk therapy practice that I have today, which is my company is called Positive Strides Therapy. And I've been at it now for 13 years and it's amazing. I love the work I'm doing. I love working with the clients. I feel like I'm a better therapist and that's okay. You know, that we can say that sometimes that some atmospheres are not as good for us as others. And just very, very happy to be practicing this way as I see the benefits more and more over the years. And it's led me to write the book and to teach some courses, all available on my website. One thing I do want to say, because this is really important, is in terms of taking care of yourself as a therapist, is connecting with other walk and talk therapists. And I have a Facebook group. It's called Walking Outdoor Therapists. And it might be a little bit hard to find, but it's so worth it if you can get to it. You can either get to it through me, like personally, we can be friends, and then, or I can invite you, or you could just look it up and ask. And you just have to answer the 3 membership questions. So just as long as you answer them, then I'll let you in. Right now, we have over 700 people in this group. This is a group I started maybe 6, 7 years ago with just me and a friend. And it's really growing because like Adam was telling me about your organization, right? And it's nice to connect with other people on this Facebook group. I just want to make sure I said that because this is a place where you can connect with other therapists, you know, around the world and hear how everybody's doing and ask questions. It's very, very casual.
I'm gonna ask you afterwards if you can share with me the link, and I'll try and see how we can share it with everybody here, everybody in the group. I have to say, I was sure I invented the idea of walk and talk therapy. I mean, really feel alone in this world, and I think it really is. And there's just so much there's so many questions, so many hesitations, so much to talk about and ask. So that's great. I want to share for everybody who's joined in now that apart from being the author of the book, and we'll send links for everything. It's not a sales meeting, but I will sell the links of how to find the book and also Jen's website, where I saw there's a good blog there and lots of other additional information. I'll send all these links afterwards so everybody has access to that.
Sounds good. Yeah.
Do you remember the first patient you decided to go out into the field with?
Yes, I absolutely do. So I had been working in an office and I saw this kid. He was about 12 years old. He had depression, ADHD. And when I saw him in the office, he was always very down, quiet, hard to pull out. You know, when you work with kids, you work with teens, like you have to ask a lot of questions, you have to do a lot of work. And it was a lot of work with him. But when I started to think about this idea and I began to tell some of my clients and their family members, his mom in particular said to me, please, please, please take him outside. He loves being outside. You know, that would be great. So I said, okay, great. So he was my very first client. We get out there. It was winter. There was snow on the ground. We went around this beautiful lake. There's a path around the lake with these big like boulders, these rocks that when I saw him out there, he was a different person. Okay. I was like, is this the same kid that's been sitting in my office? And I'm like trying so hard to get him to talk and open up. And we got out there and he was just running around and I had to chase a little, try to keep up with him, and he'd climb on the boulders and the rocks and he was just full of energy. And I saw a different side of him and it made me realize like we are not looking at the whole person sometimes when they just come into the office, and being in a space where they're comfortable, nature, especially, you see so much more. And so I thought like, okay, I'm onto something, at least for him. And actually, when I first started it, I didn't do a lot of research. So as you read in the book, my book is basically based on all the mistakes I made. So other people can learn from them. So I did look up information after meeting with this client, found that there's evidence that this is helpful, that nature-based therapy is in practice in many parts of the world, and started doing more research and grew from there.
Is that something you find with a lot of clients? I'm curious also about adults, because I can imagine children now, you switch the setting, switch the atmosphere, and there's suddenly something new comes out. Do you see that kind of shift with older people as well?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think a big part of that, Adam, is really this idea that we're using the whole body, because if like I have to meet with somebody online because let's say the weather is really horrible, then, you know, I'm reminded that I'm just seeing this, right? And it's very flat. And when we're with each other, you can sort of see more, you can see what their body is doing when they're going faster, when they're going slower, you can reflect on that. So yeah, I think you just get more from a person by being outside with them. The other point I'll make is the connection, right? That it's not just like this person taking a walk, but we're together. And you know, when we like mirror somebody's nervous system, we really understand them better. Like as many boundaries as we have as therapists, and we know like, oh, I have to be a professional now and I'm going to put up my boundary. But there's also this feeling of like, well, we also have to connect. We have to empathize. We have to feel. And when I'm walking with somebody next to them, no matter how old they are, I almost feel like I could get that energy from them. And then they can get that energy back from me. And we can empathize in a more in a way that connects our nervous systems. Yeah.
I don't know if other people, and Wrote wrote this, I'll repeat it. Feel free to write questions in the chat and we'll try and relate to all of those. You've started mentioning the therapeutic relationship and walking by each other. And the question that jumps to my mind is, how do you feel that affects the fact that actually a lot of the time you can't really see your patient's face and they can't necessarily see your face? How does that work? How does that influence?
Yeah. I mean, it's something that you kind of get used to. I see enough of them and I make sure that I'm adjusting my posture and my way of looking over towards them. I feel like you see enough. I don't know. I guess I would say, to be honest, if you're like somebody who's trained to just stare the entire session at your client, maybe like psychoanalysis, but although even there, and like sometimes the patient is looking at the ceiling, right, and you're behind them. So, I mean, it really just depends, but I get so much information out of them. I don't feel like I miss. I mean, somebody starts to tear up, you see it, you feel it. It's not missed.
You started talking about the relationship and how it affects the relationship. what kind of questions and what kind of hesitations or even misconceptions do other therapists have about your work, about this walk and talk therapy?
Yeah. Well, I would say that the most sort of innocent thing is that people think it's just something simple to just go do. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Like one of my friends who's a therapist told me recently, she said, oh, I got locked out of my office. And so we just went for a walk. And I was like, great. How was it? But meanwhile, I was really thinking like, oh gosh, like you should do a little research. You should have an informed consent. You should make sure that you have the path planned out, that it's safe, that it's private enough. There's a lot of things to think about. So I'd say like innocently, it sounds simple, but the more you do it, the more you kind of want to do it better. So I would say to be encouraging, I would just say, learn, practice, try, but do your homework and think about it. Yeah. I think the other thing that people think about is almost like your question before about like looking at somebody is like, are you going to be able to connect emotionally? Like some people want their like as a client, some people want their therapist to give them undivided 100% this attention. And I think vice versa, as the therapist, some therapists think that that's what they need. So I think that's either can be a misconception, or it can be something that maybe the therapist thinks, okay, maybe this isn't for me, if they're really used to operating that way and don't make that change.
Just thinking associatively about what you've just said, and it sort of resonates with the real need that we should have or recommended is the ability to allow space for silence in a therapy session. It shouldn't just be about ping pong of communication, of talking, but letting room for other things inside, and maybe the work outside really that's sort of built in this additional space, this room for other things apart from intense concentration and dialogue.
Yeah. I often say that like, we're used to pauses in conversation as therapists. Silence, the sound of silence can be very evocative, very helpful, right? Well, not everybody is used to that. And we could still have that when we're outside in nature. We could still have pauses, but maybe with less feeling of awkward. Maybe we have a pause, but there's also a bird that flies by, or a breeze that blows the trees and rustles the leaves, and that distraction can be comforting, can be welcome, part of nature. It could be a sign for some people, or a symbol. Like there's a lot you can do with that. It doesn't have to just be a awkward, we're staring at each other and now what?
There's room for other emotions apart from feeling awkward. There's just so many questions that jump to mind. But maybe before we move on and you started talking about some of the difficulties, are there other sort of misconceptions or questions that therapists or patients come up to you and ask, but how does this work?
Yeah. Well, I think that the biggest thing that therapists are concerned with is privacy, right? Mm. Because unless you own your own land, you're not going to get 100% privacy. So because we're in a shared space, right? We're in a park that anybody can access, or a walking path, or for some of you, maybe a beach. Privacy is important. And I think the more familiar you are with your space, so I tend to work in the same park. 90% of my sessions are in the same park. I know the park very well. I know 8 a.m. we've got 5 people that come with their dogs. I know that at 3 in the afternoon, in the fall, the track practice, the runners come by from the school. So I know my park very well. Get to know your park, get to know your space, design it in a way that's going to be as private as possible. I also like to have options on the trail. If someone's coming and they're a little too close, is there another trail we can go down? Or is there a little beach or a little bench to pause and have a mindfulness moment? So I would say privacy is a big thing. And then also just how you handle that. Because yes, inevitably there will be other people around. So how you handle that and model that for your clients is very important. So I don't engage. I mean, I'm usually a very friendly person. And if I'm walking with my family, it's hi to everyone who walks by, you know, but when I'm with my client, I don't even say hello. If someone says hi to me, I'll smile, nod, you know, but I'm not going to engage. So it's important that you're focused just on your client. So privacy. And then I think the other big thing that comes up, Adam, is just like, what if somebody becomes emotional, like really emotional, right? And either there's people walking by, or what if you're somewhere and it can feel like a little, I don't know if it's uncomfortable or you're not ready to handle that, or you just start thinking, is this safe even? You know, preparing as much as possible for that. And also building on getting to know your clients, like, you know, just making sure that this person, what they're going through, is it okay? Is it going to be, use your best judgment. There's no formula for this, but use your best judgment. Is this a good idea to be out here with this person? And is this emotional piece going to be a safety concern?
I'm going to make a comment and try not to forget and bring a question that came up from Avishag.
Okay.
I think an additional point which sort of I idealize often nature as wilderness. You know, we're going to have this ability to go out to this absolutely isolated piece of land. You know, I imagine the desert as the ideal place to do some nature-based therapy. But you're talking about urban space, parks. In your book, you even mentioned how it can even be somebody's street. It doesn't actually have to be this idealized nature. I think that's really, really important part, because we don't always, I think, looking at the group, I don't know if everybody has all the time access with their clients to nature, which will provide the ideal situation. So you're talking about learning how to deal with the imperfection, the good enough nature.
Yes. And just keeping in mind, if something is going to be in the way, if it's too much or too hard, to reconsider your space. But, you know, on that note, I was actually kind of curious, and I don't know if you want to get into this now or we put it on hold or talk about it in some other way, but I was thinking about just, you know, being in Israel and how can you do this outdoor work, and what happens if a siren goes off? What, you know, and I certainly don't have the answer to this, but if anybody would like to chime in or talk about if this is unique to your group right here today. So just, I'm considering it, thinking about it.
Let's get to the practical. I think it's an important point, and let's get in a minute to the practicality, because you're saying the practicalities, the preparation, the training are really, really central. It's part of the setting. I want to touch bring up the question that Avishag asked, which was, she said, on the one hand, and I hope I'm translating correctly here, it does allow us to see other angles, other aspects of our patients, see them in a new light. Doesn't it sometimes, do you find that it sort of can make the boundaries less clear between the patient and yourself?
Yeah, great question. I mean, yes, I would say overall less clear than like somebody who is coming as like a trained psychoanalyst who has a blank slate and won't give anything away, right? But we're all human, we're all people. And, you know, the fact that I got to the park the way they got to the park, whether it's I take the bus or bicycle or car, they know something about me. Okay. And then we're walking together, and let's say there's some mosquitoes, some bugs, and yeah, I'm swiping them away as are they, you know, it's shared. It's a shared experience. I would say the number one principle always that I try to keep in mind is always wear your professional hat, right? What would you do if you were in the office? Like, keep that professional hat on. They need you to be there as the therapist. And yes, things will come up. Okay, you stepped in mud, or you know, tripped on something. This is part of being human, but just try to get back right to them. You know, just like when you're in therapy, you want your therapist to pay attention to you. You don't really want them talking about themselves. But this is also a space where things are going to happen to both of us. just try to minimize that. And honestly, it doesn't happen that much. It's fine, and can still totally focus on that person.
I think that's the beauty of it. Just to reiterate, what comes out more than our personal life is our humanity. We were having a discussion in another group of what's the difference between working with ChatGPT or its future version, which will have a perfect human face and respond perfectly and won't make all the mistakes that I make as a therapist. But it doesn't have the humanity, it doesn't suffer, the mosquitoes don't itch it, you don't sweat.
Right. And it goes back to like this idea of understanding somebody's, not just their nervous system, but what space they're in, and this shared sense. We're in something together. There's also something very primitive about us going through something together. Like we're both sweating, we're both climbing a hill, we're both working hard, we're going to do this. And afterwards, even if we go out in the rain and you come back and we said, we did it, like, what's wrong with we did it? That actually feels better than just I did it. Like sometimes it feels good to say we did it. Yeah.
Shared goal. Let's move on to practicality. And somebody brought up the question of, when you're going outside, and that's true, you should know about where your bomb shelter is or what to do in the situations. So maybe if you could start with talking a bit about really these practicalities, and we'll talk maybe in general and then focus on the uniqueness of Israel and our climate, which regretfully is not as perfect as these. We don't have too many rivers here, at least not where I live.
It is not perfect here. Right now it's like 95 degrees, which I don't even know what that is in Celsius, maybe 35, and humid. It's very hot and humid. But yes, so you want to know about practicalities for being outside.
Yeah. Let's talk about that for a bit.
Yes. And the heat. I mean, the heat, right? Like, again, going back to this, take care of yourself first. If you should know what your limit is. Okay. Heat exhaustion is real. You don't need to be a hero. You don't need to be out there making yourself miserable. So get started early. I mean, some suggestions, just get started early, have lots of drinks with, replenishing nutrients in it, and take breaks. Wear cool clothes, walk in the shade. Shade is very helpful, very important. That will lower the temperature for you. Maybe limit it to 2 a day or something that will work for you. And also keep an eye on your client. Yesterday I was out with somebody and it was very hot. And, at least 3 times I just checked in. How are you feeling now? How are you doing now? Yeah. Just to make sure she's okay and myself. Yeah. And don't be afraid to change plans if you have to. There have been times, not heat wise, but times I've been caught in thunderstorms and we've had to make a run for it or just change plans a little bit on the fly. And such is life, right?
What do you do when there's a thunderstorm?
Run for cover. Just run for cover.
And do you manage to carry on the session after you found some cover?
Yeah. With some good laughter and shared respect for nature. Yes.
What are the practical tips? You mentioned in the book that, we can almost look at the things you have to do before, if we're talking about insurance and things during the session itself. Maybe afterwards we'll talk a bit about the structure of the session.
Okay. So, right. Well, before, I would say, even when you're setting up your practice, make sure you have an informed consent, make sure the phone call screening beforehand, that you're making sure that this person is going to be somebody who can handle walking, wants to be walking, sort of understands the limits of confidentiality. Because I do always say, I will respect and try to protect your privacy as much as possible, but there are limits to the confidentiality. I mean, if somebody sees us, I can't help it. They see us, So that is preparation, screening, yes, and the informed consent. And I don't know, in Israel, do you use malpractice insurance? Yeah. Okay. Yep. So call your malpractice insurance, make sure they're okay with this and covering anything. I mean, remember, generally, at least in the States, my malpractice insurance is covering my advice, my therapy services. It's not, even if I was in an office, it's not covering if a picture on the wall falls on somebody. this is something else. So it's not going to protect somebody. So that's where your informed consent, you want to say, you, the client, are responsible for your own personal well-being and your private property on the walk. So it's good.
I'll intervene for a second. I'll just add I'm not a lawyer or an insurance specialist, but in general in Israel, you divide it between your malpractice insurance, we call it your professional indemnity insurance, מתוך, and third-party insurance. And for anybody who's working a lot outside, that's something you have to make sure your third-party insurance will cover sprains, and sprained ankles, equipment, whatever. So it's something, again, talk to your insurance agent. Sorry, I interrupted me, but thanks.
No, that's helpful. That is good to know and good to think about. I mean, there's a lot of little practical pieces. I would also say, just for people who haven't started doing this yet, one thing that could be helpful is just start with your easiest people. Like if you're seeing clients now indoors or online, just starting to figure out the best way of like, how can we start? Like if I were to provide a outdoor session, let's say on a Thursday morning, who do I think could meet me somewhere? And I think a lot of times people have that question, therapists have that question, how do I even get started? And I would say, you don't have to do a big deal. Like it doesn't have to be a big deal. Get your paperwork together and then just start with the current clients. Like who could you imagine doing this with? And just start with them. And I think that's, less overwhelming than trying to overhaul and turn over your whole practice.
And how do you manage, let's just say, and this is a question which somebody brought up, and I also ask myself sometimes. I mean, I sometimes do one a day, not very often, not as often as I would like to. But how would you manage to have one after the other? I mean, how do you manage to plan exactly to walk 45 minutes or an hour and finish exactly on the right time, but not get clients to meet,
Right.
How do you manage all these logistics?
So it's taken some time, but I think I have it down now, Adam. So it's, for me, it's a tricky little dance. It's a funny thing. So I meet for 45 minutes. It's kind of funny because I show up in my car. There's 2 parking lots in the park I go to. So I go to one parking lot. I meet with a client for 45 minutes. I keep an eye on the time. And then I get in my car and I drive across the street to the other parking lot. And sometimes I'm just bouncing back and forth. And it seems to work. Every once in a while, you can't help it. They're going to see each other. But you know what? When we go to if I go to therapy, I see the client before or after me. Well, we're people. It's okay.
What about the finishing? I asked a question. I'm not sure. Like sometimes a person, like when you are meeting in a room, then you can lead the person to the door. You could get up, you could show them signs that it's time to finish. But when we meet outdoors, then even if we walk with them towards my car and I'm trying to get into the car, but it's a person that doesn't stop talking, then it's like, it's lo naim to just be like, okay, bye. Like, even if you set a timer in advance, 10 minutes, and you set another timer to end, and because of the boundaries. So if you have any suggestions in relation to that.
Right. So you're saying like in the office, the door is sort of the boundary. But Nareed, I remember, sorry, Rotem, go ahead.
No, the door and the clock in front of you, and then you can just stand up and go to the door.
Yes. And I also remember from working in the office that there are some people who don't understand the door or the clock, right?
Yeah.
So this is the same problem that I would have outdoors. So same thing, I'm really sorry. We're going to have to talk more about this next time. Or, yes, great point. Let's save that for next time. Okay. Yeah. Oh, I hear you have so much more to say. Let's remember that for next time. So all these ways to be as nice as possible, besides closing the door on their face. But I think I think walking away is ultimately you have to position your body language to say
you can always start running.
you can start.
Just run.
But I think your tip of having two points really can help there as well. The fact that you can get in the car and drive off to the next spot, which could be 200 meters away, that's an important.
I mean, the car is a good boundary too, because there are times where, let's say I don't have a client next and I just end on time and I say goodbye and we both go to our cars. Do you know how many people now sit in their car for 5 minutes looking at their phone before they drive? Like, nobody has ever knocked on my window and said, excuse me, I have one more thing to tell you. So I think it is a boundary as well.
Right. That's very helpful, because these technicalities do become very important. How do you manage writing? I mean, I'm a bit fanatic about writing. I write all through therapy. I don't trust my own memory. How do you manage that?
Oh, okay. For notes, you mean during the session?
Yeah. Sorry, notes, note taking.
Yeah. Well, I never was somebody who took a lot of notes, even in the office. So, and I keep my notes fairly brief, but I do keep records on everybody. So I would say there's something interesting that happens when you're walking and you have place associated with the story or the experience, even if you're not working with a story that day. It does trigger more memory around, oh yeah, where were we? What was she saying? So it's a little bit easier to write that down. But if that's not working for you, I mean, there's so much we can do now with our phones, like at the end of the session. So one thing is, you get back in the car and you can send yourself an email or a text that just said, touched on this, this, and this. So it's a little, note to remember what happened. The other thing that I sometimes do with certain clients, if it works for them, is we'll summarize at the end. Sometimes people really like to have their own notes. So I'll tell them to text me, right? So my client may say, oh yeah, okay, so I really want to be able to say that to my mom. What did we say again? And I'll say, let's write it out. And you text me. And she'll say, okay, I wanted to be direct and set this boundary with my mom. And then and then the trick is, it works for her. And then I have what we talked about.
Thanks. I'm just thinking aloud here. There maybe there's another aspect. So from the point of view of notes taking, either at the end of the session, you mentioned how having this, let's call it this mechanical structure, there's the bit where we walk towards the big rock. There's a bit where we met a stranger. There's a bit where we petted a dog. And that will help me when I'm trying to remember this session and write down notes. I'm just thinking here, I wonder if it also helps the patient remember what happened during the session. There's often a question that comes up, and we in our supervision this week, we had this long conversation about the patient who doesn't remember what happened in sessions. I'm just curious if maybe even your own experience has said something about that. There's a fact that there's this sort of physical structure. We walked, we moved, we came back. Maybe that helps patients remember a bit more from the sessions as well.
Yeah. I think so. And also, on that note, sometimes, we walk the same route. Certain clients, we have the same route. And what will happen is I'll pass by something and I'll go, oh, when we were here last week, we were talking about this. How is that going? So it's interesting. It's just a different dynamic.
Nice. Yeah, also it helps makes some kind of connection, continuity between different sessions. Let's go into a bit more, if that's okay, okay, how do you use the outside, the nature, different aspects that enhance your therapeutic work that are not available when you're sitting in the office?
Yeah. So many ways. And I was just thinking, especially about when we were talking a few minutes before everyone came on, and your work, Wrote with veterans, right? And I was thinking about that and how important it is for Israelis. You're supporting people who've been in the army or experienced some trauma. And I feel like I'm glad you brought it up, because I think this piece with nature is super, super important. There is the feeling right now that Israelis have to be resilient, and nature is resilient. And this parallel is so strong and so important. You know, we don't just suffer. There's life after suffering, and there's growth. Yeah. I mean, there's destruction and then there's growth. And it can be so comforting to see this in nature. You know, I'm not exactly sure. I've never been to Israel. Like, I've never seen like fall foliage. Do you have like the leaves changing colors in Israel?
Some parts of Israel.
Not like
Not like, no, like the Northeast here is like very vibrant in October. You know, I'm most of my experience in Israel has been in summers. So, but there's this feeling like things are changing, the transition, right? And also in the spring. Okay, I know you have the, you know, like Tu B'Shvat, right? The shkidim, the blossoms on the trees. Like this is a powerful reminder to people that there's life after darkness. And so the metaphors are endless. So when you ask about how do you use the nature, it is on a whim, it is creative, it is dependent on what this client is going through, and it is available all the time, everywhere. And I mean, some of my younger clients, I do see some teenagers, they like to, you know, tease older adults and make fun of us about anything. So, you know, I use that though, because then I'll be like, a metaphor of the day is da da da. And then sometimes they'll come up with a metaphor and I'm like, yeah, now you're coming up with metaphors. And it's great because it could be silly, it could be poignant, it can be meaningful, but there's always something to grab onto that helps people work through, whether it's their trauma or their stress or the anxiety or depression or any life transition. So I think metaphors in nature are super powerful. The other thing I would say, how I use nature almost every session, is with mindfulness, with orienting, with grounding, to be able to fully see something or hear something, touch something in nature can really bring us back to a calmer state and to a place where we can breathe, where we can feel held by nature and feel present. Like I have this one client, she's very musical. She loves to listen to the sounds of the birds. And it's always like a reset for her. Maybe it's not my strength. Maybe I'm more visual, but I ask her what she notices, and it's the sounds. And it just brings her back to like this feeling of safety.
A lot of work with metaphors, work with sensations, with our senses.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any other ways that jump to mind? Maybe even some examples of different clients in the way that you feel the uniqueness of working outdoors, working with nature.
Maybe some other interactions.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So many examples. I'm trying to think of like the ones that have been really helpful and meaningful. What comes to mind is work around grief, right? And loss, and feeling like people can relate in nature when something is frustrating, when something is beyond their control, right? To see that there are other things. Maybe there's a boulder in the river, in the creek, and the water is, you know, rushing around it, but that boulder is always going to be there. It's not moving. You know, relating to the grief is always going to be a part of your life, but also we have to kind of keep going around it. I've done things with younger people who need sort of like the manipulative pieces of holding something, picking up a stick, and it represents something that they want to get rid of, and throwing it. Okay, here's a good one. So many like little snippets of things. I had a client who just 17, she really didn't want to talk a lot about things, and we would walk and talk for a bit, and then she would stop and want to skim the rocks, like skip them, how it hits. And she was great at it, and we'd spend at least 20 minutes there, and she'd just be tossing them, and we can use that to, what does that represent? You want to throw that one, and then also, like, how did you learn to throw like that? Wow, I heard this whole story about growing up and, throwing a ball with her father. And what that meant to her. So using objects in nature to represent different emotions. And then what do you want to do with that? How do you want to move with that? Yeah. Yes, definitely playfulness. I've gone into the water with, younger children and get our feet wet and put some leaves on a stream and watch them float away, and they could put their problems on the leaf, metaphorically speaking, and watch it float away, or, maybe pick some flowers. Sometimes there's a playground where I walk too. So sometimes we'll end at a playground, and even the older kids, like 16, 17, want to go on the playground, and it's fun. It's fun, and they're distracted and they're happy. And you know what? What's wrong with us seeing a happy side of them, right? We want to encourage that. Great.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think that's an aspect we always focus, or we have a tendency to focus on the unpleasant emotions. But sometimes we can also learn a lot by allowing ourselves even just to let the more pleasant emotions be there.
Can I ask something?
Please.
I wonder if you I wonder about the flexibility of the indoor and the outdoor with the patients. For example, if you are going with someone walking outside, this is the frame of the therapy with him, or you are integrate both kinds of spaces. For example, a clinic or a specific walk in a specific park, or are you changing the environment? Can you tell something about this kind of flexibility of the change in this session? There is a setting, you describe kind of a setting, and what about the flexibility between different settings, or is it something that you're keeping the same? Can you add something about it?
Yeah. I think I know what you're asking, and I'll try to answer it, but if I don't get to it, then tell me more. But I think it actually brings me back to something I wanted to say earlier about the heat, right? Because you're talking about being flexible with the situation, and with the heat, we have to be flexible with the situation too. And I guess it makes me think about well, what if it doesn't always work to be outside? What can you do? And I think about bringing elements of nature indoors. So, can you have a collection in your office of some seashells or pine cones or leaves or rocks or something? And what can you do with that to, even have somebody hold something, and you ask them, what does this feel like? Or what does it make you think of? There are certain exercises you can do also to bring out this environmental piece. In the office, you can ask people about their history of place. For example, when you think of nature in your childhood, what do you imagine, or what do you picture? And somebody might say, oh, yes, I remember the camp I went to, and there was this one forest that we loved to hike in, and you go with that, right? So go with that. Tell me more. What do you remember? What was it? What did it smell like? What did it look like? How was the light in there? So we can always bring nature inside too. Does that answer the question, Molly?
Yes, I know that we can bring nature inside too. What I'm asking is, how do you decide for each patient what is the best for him? For example, you said about it, it's a great example, but can you tell more about your decisions about the different environment, when do you decide to change environment or keep going with the same person, the same place, or in the same way? Can you tell something about this dynamic? Because I think that it has something that can be interesting to figure out.
Yeah. No, that's a great question. So I guess it depends what you have access to, right? If it's a park, if it's a computer, telehealth, or if it's an office space or something else that I'm not mentioning. But I would say you do what works for them, and you do what works for you. And you will know if something isn't right. Like if you're walking with them and let's say for some reason that it's just not working, then you make a change. So for example, I do not work with people who have an eating disorder. I'm not specifically trained in that. And I think they need really special help. And I try to screen for that before meeting with somebody for the first time. But one time, it wasn't clear. And I said, okay, let's meet once. And I got there and I saw the person clearly. It was very, very thin, very, very thin. And they wanted to walk and burn more calories. And I was like, no, this is not in your best interest. And so, I sent them somewhere else, gave a few referrals, but I personally had my limit that was not going to be okay because I didn't think it was best for them. So, I mean, we always are assessing for all kinds of things, but that's just one example.
Do you assess, or do you have situations where you say to a patient, I think the topic for next week, maybe we should be inside, maybe we shouldn't go outside, not because of the weather, but because of the content? Does that happen?
That hasn't happened to me. Not to say that it couldn't. I'll keep that in mind.
Maybe if I can add, maybe decide different places in nature. Maybe because of something that brought up, maybe goes to a mountain, maybe go to a river or some.
Yeah. If you have the flexibility for that. Or like one time I walked in a neighborhood with somebody and it was probably too close to her house because she kept seeing people and we're not doing that again. We'll go somewhere else. Yeah. I
have to share. Before we started the meeting, I said, okay, is it going to really take, am I going to manage are we going to fill in 45 minutes? And I'm just looked at the watch now and say, oh, crikey, we have to finish in a second. So maybe before we leave room for more questions, the most amusing thing that happened in one of your walks with a patient?
Oh my goodness. Okay. Let's see. There's so many things. Okay. Well, recently there was a lost dog and we were just finishing up our session. And I'm not a big dog person. I mean, they're cute, but I don't have pets. So anyway, this dog started to wander out onto the road and my client she's a big cat person. And just because you're a cat person doesn't mean you're a dog person, but somehow she managed to get the dog, and we found the phone number and the collar, and we're trying to call, and then the dog walker came along, and we reconnected them. But it's just okay. Maybe it's not that funny, but it's something you see. Like, this is unique. Like, this would never happen in an office. This would never happen in an office. You would never get a lost dog who was a very sweet dog. But you know what else I saw? I saw my client being kind. I saw her, go out of her way to try to help this dog. When the dog walker came along, she interacted with her so nicely. Like, I would never see this side of her. So, I mean, it was helpful for me to see that. And people love to, especially kids, this was an adult, but especially kids love when adults can learn from them. And it also made me think like I could say something to her, like, you handled that so well. Like, I'm impressed, just like, it's okay. Give them a compliment. Like, just be a person. You don't always have to be this, in the box therapist. So I don't know. Things like that happen. Yeah. I mean, one time I got stung by a bee. That was the worst thing that's ever happened to me after, many years of doing this. And I was like, I'm in a lot of pain. And I said to my client, like, is it okay if we go back and just sit on the bench? And, they were so nice about it and didn't, look, if this happens once in 13 years of all the work I do, it's okay. Like, you have to take care of yourself. But you get to see a different side of people, and I'm grateful for that.
That's a brilliant story. I love that, and I think it reflects the humility or humbleness of this type of work, but also of probably yourself in particular.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. We really have to finish in a moment, so let's if anybody would like to ask the last question, put you all on the spot, came up in the chat. I think it's a good time to say again, thank you so much for your time, Jen, and thank you for everybody who participated, and everybody who's going to hear the recording. So I know a lot of people are looking forward also to hear the recording. So again, thanks so much. And you've reminded me of how much I want to go back and start continue working with patients, because it's been a long time since I've taken them outside, and maybe at the beginning of the day it's cool enough still, or the end of the day. I want to strongly recommend to everybody here, get the book. I don't get any percent in the sales here, but it's really, it's one of the, I will say, it's one of the most concise books. It's not a long book, but it really manages to cover all the important spots, both theoretical and practical. And it's really, I would say it's a holistic book. And I love that about it. Thank you again, everybody. And Jen, Wrotem.
Thank you so much, Jen. So nice to meet you.
Yes, thank you both for having me, and for Nurit for connecting us. And yes, just keep praying for you and the safety of Israel, and keep doing your good work.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jen. It was so nice to hear you and see you.
Thank you, everyone. Keep in touch.